So I'm Richard,
I'm Roy.
and this is the TBK podcast. Today we're going to be discussing a variety of news articles and sharing our opinions and views on those topics. So the first of the topics that I'd like to discuss is this week's Panorama on BBC One, where they discussed David Kinahan and the Kinahan family's involvement in boxing, the corruption that comes alongside it, and just the crime. It was quite a shocking documentary, wasn't it, Roy? What do you think?
Yeah, it was shocking. I didn't know it went that deep, to be fair. I was watching the show. It was just interesting from the start how he was taking fighters off of other promoters. It was in contract. There were shootouts at presses. You know, the guy was an advisor, but he's making money. I just don't know where his role is in boxing, but he seems to have his hand in there in every pocket, you know?
Yeah, 100%. I think that I was shocked. I mean, I knew about the shooting at the press conference where someone had died, but I didn't know that it all linked back to Kinahan. And I also knew about what happened at Mackin's gym in Marbella, but I didn't know it linked back to the same person, which is very shocking. I think the concern is, you know, how much intimidation goes on. How much is it possible that these people are involved in match fixing at a low level or at a high level? How deep does it go? Because I can't imagine too many boxers are gonna are gonna have too much to say if these guys turn up in their changing room and threaten to do whatever. I don't want to go down the LDBC. This is why Fury's supreme route, because even if there was something amiss in that fight, I think that Fury is just a more skilled boxer than Wilder anyway. He could have won anyway. He won the first fight. But at the same time, I really think that some of his excuses don't sound so far-fetched now. I think perhaps the fight might not have concluded itself in the same manner. Fury would have won anyway. But I don't think you go to America and train with Emmanuel Stewart's nephew for 6 months and all of a sudden become this huge concussive puncher.
I understand what you mean. Well, going back to the corruption of it and what is it? Are they able to, I guess, match fix? And in essence, and what we're talking about is changing gloves, having something in gloves, giving the upper hand to Fury. I don't know. I found it quite bizarre, because watching the issues in the gym and then watching McGuigan, he looked really uncomfortable in the interview, like he didn't want to say too much because he didn't want them coming back for him. It just seemed like he was reluctant to say something that he wanted to say, and it reminded me, I think, of years ago I watched something on Frank Warren when Don King came into his offices and demanded something, and he had like supposedly a shotgun. This is all hearsay. I have no proof, so I'm not looking to get myself in trouble either here. So going on that in that sense, that if Kinahan's so powerful, could he have fixed fights and refs? It's possible, because the guy's got some mad money for him to have the sort of setup he had and the influence he's got. And I'm thinking, the only thing I didn't understand was he had very big fighters behind him, one being Fury. At any point during any of these investigations, why did they not distance themselves from him? Just to kind of keep their profile at the level that it was at, whether it's Billy Joe, I don't know if he's involved, but especially Fury. Yes, the guy's got you back into shape. Yeah, he's giving you that mojo. But why stick with him when you distance yourself at that point?
It's really unusual. But does he have something over them?
Definitely.
Evidence of something having happened. It's really
unless it's fair.
It's also subjective. We don't know anything for fact, but I think it opens up the door for questions to be asked about performances. And these commissions, they're not guarded by loads of security. They are vulnerable. It's not beyond belief that someone could intimidate someone from commission. It's starting to sound like a bit of a conspiracy theory now, but neither me nor you put together this documentary, did we?
No,
we didn't put it together. So there are elements of truth in what's going on. Fury is a likable person for a lot of the boxing fans. He really resonates with the lads in boxing, and lad culture. So I think people are reluctant to ask these questions, but having backing by a well-known gangster is something that surely needs looking at. Okay, let's move on to our next topic, and that is Scotland's ranking. To me, I can't pronounce his name. It's a female fighter. So it's Hannah Rankin. She's going to South Africa in March to fight Kalosa no Dobayani. That's a bit rude of me not to pronounce her name correctly. I'm surprised that fight's happening. I'm not sure if it's going to go ahead. So, as opposed to discussing the fight in its entirety, what I want
is that the one that was originally cancelled last year?
It was, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I remember, yeah.
What I really want to discuss is international boxing. So not just a localized fights. They're speaking about cancelling another fight. I can't remember the two fighters because it's due to be in Australia. It's Teofimo Lopez. He's supposed to fight in Australia, isn't he? But
he is, yeah.
It's looking like it's not going to go ahead, and he's saying that he might be able to fight Haney. How is this going to impact boxing? The lack of international travel or the requirement for fighters to remain in lockdown?
It's strange because they've got the tennis happening, haven't they? And they've put all of them into hotels. So I can't see why they don't do the same thing as what Hearn did last year. If you've got a setup, just get everyone to go abroad, stay in that hotel quarantine for 2 weeks, and have the fight with no audience. I don't see the issue. We're looking at this week or coming up. In Tampa, you've got the Super Bowl. I watched the Lakers the other night with fans. Why can't we have boxing? I don't think Teofimo Lopez should go there and end up with Manny Pacquiao, exactly. You're not going to get that decision unless you knock the guy straight out or out of the ring. But in some aspects, I think, I was having discussions today. You want to kind of sort out the coronavirus. The best way is to stop any international travel. So I can understand why it's happening, but it's going to have a big impact on the sport. We're not going to see certain fighters. As we know, majority of the fighters are in Europe. Some of the other better fighters in America, they need to fight. But we can get some great matchups until that's done by people fighting within their own countries.
We need domestic matches, I agree.
Yeah, there's some good domestic fights, except for the Billy Joe and Canelo. There's some good domestic fights,
That's going to be a great fight as well.
It is, yeah.
Did you see the Lakers, Karen?
I did, yeah. I think they drank too much, and they had to be ejected. They didn't have to be ejected. I just feel that at the point of it starting to take over the game, mentally it would have actually affected the game. And LeBron, as he said, she didn't need to go, but they drank too much. It's the same for me drinking on planes, drinking at sport. It's going to happen. Yeah, you're either going to start shouting, get called a Karen, or you're going to open the door and try and eject yourself on a plane. So just don't drink. You'll see the end of a game, or you'll see the end of your flight.
If you don't drink, that's good advice. Okay. Yeah. So moving on, I think there was a nice little bridge just there where you mentioned Canelo against Billy Joe. I don't think we discussed it in our last podcast.
Okay.
It looks to be going ahead. I'll start first with this one. I think.
Yeah, sure.
I can't see Billy Joe standing too much of a chance. He's been inactive for such a long period of time, and to jump in, his last performance was a poor one.
The last
against
few.
Murray. Yeah, his last few. I think he's not a superior boxer to Lara. He's not a superior boxer to. I just can't see some of the opponents that Canelo's beaten. I can't see Billy Joe proving to be superior to them. I don't think he'd beat Golovkin, obviously. I think he struggles with Danny Jacobs. I think we're very quick to overrate British fighters quite often. Billy Joel's best wins are against David Lemieux, who is a C-level fighter. You
Okay.
can't really rate him any higher. He's a world champion, and a C-level fighter is not a bad fighter. But if your elite boxers are A-level fighters, and high-level world champions are B, you can't have him any higher because he has won a world title, but he spent the majority of his career getting beat up by the very best in boxing. So wins over him, Andy Lee, who retired in his next fight, and a split decision win over Chris Eubank Jr. Doesn't prove that you're elite. I think that Billy Joel's himself, he's a B-level fighter, and Canelo will prove to be A-level when they fight, in my opinion.
Yeah, I do believe Canelo will come out on top in this fight. In a sense, I think it'll be slightly one-sided, but not in a sense of a real dominance, like I'm going to batter you around the ring type, chase you down into the corners. They're both going to be very cagey. It's going to be a chess match for a while. They know they're both skilled, very good counterpunch, but they both don't have the best feet.
Yeah.
One thing that's in both favours, really, they've both got great chins. And I find that obviously you've got that sort of like heart of a warrior with Billy Joe and Fury. It comes from that traveller's lifestyle. And I just feel it's a very good matchup. At the moment, I feel that it's his best matchup, skill for skill wise. Even though I do agree with you, he's not the best fighter, Billy Joe, but it is a fight that we all want to see, because otherwise, who else is he going to kind of have in his weight class that's as skilled as him? Otherwise, he's going to keep going up, fighting slightly bigger fighters to his advantage. They're either just over the hill and have got a belt, or he can see an advantage in them whether they're slower or they're actually fit for his style of boxing. So Billy Joe is a good one. Back to the Triple G trilogy, and then maybe we'll start to see a few exhibitions and a retirement from Canelo going down as a Hall of Famer.
Yeah. So sticking on the topic of Canelo, Ryan Garcia came out, I think it was today, and said that he thinks today's Canelo beats the best Mayweather.
I just saw that, yeah.
I will start with yourself, Roy. I don't know what to say.
Okay, there's three things I don't do in boxing, man. I don't bet against Manny Pacquiao at the moment. I don't bet against Canelo, and I never would have bet against Mayweather. Mayweather, yeah, I think he hit. I do think that he had Canelo at the right time. A young, we know promoters know how to promote, and De La Hoya promoted this guy as the greatest thing when he was like a little babyface assassin. Same thing with Hearn. Hearn can make anyone look the best in the world and be a journeyman. But I do believe it would have been a better matchup if the Canelo we see today against the Mayweather we saw towards the latter end of his career. The one that was fighting the Mosleys and the Pacquiaos. Yeah. Would Canelo have won? I doubt it, because as we know that he's got the blueprint, so he would have worked him out. It would have been a very much more of a slick counter-punching style. He wouldn't have chased the fight. He'd have just let Canelo come to him. The bigger guy, bigger puncher. He'd just done what he did to McGregor. Not to say that Canelo's in his league at all, but I just think that Canelo's a really, really good fighter, and to keep matching him up against Mayweather takes away how good Canelo actually is. Leave that as his only loss to me. Mayweather goes down as one of the greatest. Canelo can also go down as one of the greatest, having lost to only the guy who says to be the best ever. So, yeah, he does lose, but he only loses again on a points decision. Not anything to be embarrassed by. Yeah,
I agree. I think Ryan Garcia, he doesn't seem to be a very big Mayweather fan. He actually he came out recently and said he'd rather have Pacquiao's career than Mayweather's, which doesn't make sense to have 6 or 7 losses.
No, I know what you mean.
So this kind of starts to correlate towards a certain viewpoint that he holds. I think Mayweather, for everyone that was there to be fought in his era, he's not a very likable character. His personality is actually something that is really grating on a lot of people. But I think there's no point in denying the facts. I don't like, as a football analogy, I don't like Luis Suarez. He's a bigger and he's trash. He's biting people. But if I deny that he's a quality footballer, then I'm I'm only fooling myself saying that he's not
Of
a
course.
footballer. He is, and you know the same thing applies with Mayweather. In my lifetime, he's the best fighter that I've seen, and that is because even Roy Jones was sensational. But Roy Jones was a sensational athlete, and when his athleticism declined, he became a punch bag. Mayweather was also a sensational athlete. When his athleticism declined, he was still a master boxer, and that's what puts him apart. He showed after his physical prime, that he had his mental prime to come, and that's why he continued to dominate the best fighters. I just think if Mayweather hadn't beat Canelo that first fight, the Canelo that we see today wouldn't exist. He learned a lot from that fight. It was like he took a beating.
I agree with you.
Literal schooling. It was a literal schooling. And it was like the best lesson of his life. He turned Canelo into the fighter he is today. If he hadn't lost that fight, he'd have lost the fight since, and likely to a bigger man. So he's so relaxed in the ring now. That was all down to Mayweather's fight with him. Before that, we saw him losing or not losing in difficult fights with Miguel Jose Cotto's, brother. Fights that should be blasting away. He wasn't too inexperienced when he fought Mayweather because he had 43 fights as a pro, and he was 23. And as we've just seen, Teofimo Lopez at 23 has just beaten the great Vasily Lomachenko. So he wasn't too young and he wasn't too inexperienced. He just wasn't ready to beat Mayweather, who was the best fighter of his era. And that's my opinion.
Yeah, it was just the right time. Mayweather came around. There's a good pack of welterweights when he moved up to 147, and he was knocking them out at lower weights. Come up and started to dominate without having to knock them out. He just started to skill. It was just unfortunate that Canelo came around at the same time. But Canelo's had a great career. Pacquiao, even though like you said, he's had a certain amount of losses, he's had a great career and still going. And Mayweather, it's been a good time for boxing in that era. So. There's only sometimes you say there's an elite fighter, and I do believe we've seen 3 elite fighters. That's Canelo, Pacquiao, and Mayweather. Someone like Ryan Garcia is one of those guys who just talks, keeps himself in the press, keeps himself active, talks a lot, but doesn't actually do anything at the end of it. So we've seen him talk about wanting to fight the likes of Tank, and then all of a sudden he's gone for a 42-year-old man or whatever he is now, Pacquiao. So. Good luck to him. Like I say to him, it's a dangerous sport, but as we said at the beginning of the show, corruption, and it's a mockery of our sport sometimes. Yeah,
it really does. It does. So you don't include Vladimir Klitschko, amongst those great fighters. You said Canelo.
Vladimir Klitschko as an elite boxer.
Yeah.
Do you know the thing with the Klitschkos? I really do like them guys. They seem to be quite. I don't know them personally, so I don't know what they were like prior to coming, but mixing around a lot of the Kronke gym and coming up through martial arts and learning the sport. When he had his few losses, and I think he had a loss to Bird, didn't he, early on?
Yeah.
Some of those losses weren't down to actually being beaten in the ring. I think he had a mental block in that fight, or something was quite weird about it, but I wouldn't call him an elite boxer. Heavyweights is very rare for me to say elite in my eyes, because heavyweight, as Dylan White says, it's just down to one punch sometimes. You've either got that one punch like Wilder.
It wasn't Bird though. It was his brother who lost the Bird.
Was it Vitali?
Yeah, it was Lamont Brewster.
Lamont Brewster beat him.
Corey Sanders. And
I like the Klitschkos, but they dominated in an era where, especially for Vlad, where he could kind of like pick and choose his fights. He got to that stage where he's picking the size of the ring, how spongy the ring was, the canvas was to his liking. It was just like I kind of stopped watching heavyweight boxing at that point. There was like Samuel Peters was the only person out there that was kind of chasing him. He fought him, and I thought, this is dead. Corey Sanders, those sort of fighters, they weren't the era that I grew up with, the tail end of the Tysons, the Ruddocks, you got the guys, Bo, Holyfield trilogies and stuff. I was like sitting there thinking, where's these fights going to come from? until we've got the likes of like AJ and that. So no, until I saw him fight AJ, that was the first exciting fight that had me like, wow, I'm on the edge of my sofa. Let me watch this fight back again tomorrow.
Yeah.
He's not an elite fighter, but he's definitely up there in that world-class scenario. Like, I wouldn't have wanted to have seen him in a matchup with those guys 10 years ago. But he designed something which was a very boring style fight, and his technique was different. So you've got to give him his props for being undefeated in, was it 10 years or some crazy number? Like,
I think his dominance worked against him. I think that he was elite. I think that it's an interesting career. He was everyone's chinny at heavyweight, and his chin got tested a few times, and that was because he was too gung-ho. But he overcame that, and he dominated, a number of fighters in boring manner. David Haye was a decent heavyweight, and he beat him with ease. So Mormek was a good cruiserweight, and he stepped up, and that was an easy fight for him. It's almost a forgettable fight. He avenged his loss to Sam Peters, and I think, come the end of his career, I think he had proved himself to be elite, but he beat Povetkin, again, another quality win. But it's just, his style was not easy to watch. It was very boring, but it was always a big event when Vladimir Klitschko came out to fight. You had the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Yeah, I don't think he ever left. Was it Hamburg? He never really left Germany too much to fight as well.
No, he didn't.
They had it under control. They were doing well. I did prefer watching Vitali for some reason. I liked a few of his fights, but again, they didn't excite me enough to want to see like the way that I used to watch Lewis or Holyfield or Bo and Tyson. It was just like, okay, Vitali or Vlad's fighting, okay. It's kind of more exciting about them walking out in that Ocean's 11 film, so
yeah.
it was just one of those things. They are quality fighters. I'm not going to take it away from. I just wouldn't call them elite.
Excitement wasn't there.
Yeah, it wasn't there, and that dominance did work against them, like you said. Yeah,
it did. So the last topic, I don't want it to seem like I'm always talking about this fighter, but he's at the top of the headlines again, but this time with a negative spin. Callum Smith has said that Eubank Jr. is let down by his lack of boxing ability. How do you feel about that? What do you think?
Yeah, the only thing with Chris Eubank is it was the stubbornness early on. He started to kind of reflect the same personality as his dad, and I think he started to slowly break away from that. Like, I'm not sparring with anyone. I don't need to do this to become. And they were it's almost like I do like his work ethic is amazing. Like I think he gets beaten and walks out the ring straight to a gym. Most people might sulk for a week or go off for a few months. The guy goes straight back into the gym, even when he's won or lost. Work ethic's amazing. He's a beast in the gym, but he has to get the right people behind him. Not always does it have to be an ex-pro. Roy, like, I'm a big fan of Roy Jones Jr. Like, that guy was amazing for me growing up.
Incredible.
I'm in my 40s. Yeah, he's amazing. So watching him, would I go and say I'm going to go and learn from a legend? That doesn't mean that you're going to become one. So you've got to find the right person that's going to fit your style. And I don't feel he's got such an aggressive style in boxing. He should have gone to an actual coach and get him the right setup and the right sort of sparring partners. He's very arrogant with his I'm not going to spar, and jumping from ship to ship has affected him. He's got to just find one person, stay there, become the main person that's stable, get the right sparring partners, get the right promoter, and have the right attitude to actually fight. Get 2 or 3 fights a year. Callum Smith saying he hasn't got any skill in his arsenal or not enough, he was probably right, because he fights anyone. But to be honest with you, even though he's got that sort of lack of skills, his determination could get him through certain big fights. I feel that if the Billy Joe Saunders fight had started the way it kind of ended, it would have been a better fight. And he's one of those guys who seems to be able to go up to 160, drop to 150 if you want to go up to 170 and fight at such a high pace. He should have gone for a fight where it was more of a scrap, a real dogfight fight. Not saying they should get in with Triple G, but we would have seen how good he is chin wise, because we haven't really seen him in there with anyone who can actually punch him up or apart from Billy, actually did like kind of school him a little bit, but I kind of started to warm towards Chris Eubank Jr. and I'm hoping that he gets the fights that he needs. To be honest with you, I really do. But I would like to see him go with someone who could help him skill-wise. Like to try and, like, I don't know if it would be a Virgil or should he go with someone like Freddie Roach who deals with more aggressive fighters, moving around on their feet a lot more. He needs to find a decent coach. Not so much move away from Roy Jones. It's good to have a good advisor. But go and get a really good coach behind you because he's not getting younger. He's not building a good profile. He's just living off his dad's name, unfortunately.
I agree. I think Eubank Jr. he's been mismanaged, to be honest, and that's because his dad has done the majority of the management throughout his career.
Of course, yeah.
I think that he's good enough, Eubank Jr., to have beaten some of the lower level world champions, and he could be living off the hype. I mean, if you look at the middleweight division, you know, it's not always been great. It's not been a great division. Billy Joel is a former champion, having beaten Lemieux and Andy Lee and Chris Eubank Jr. I think
that's true, actually.
Obviously, Eubank Jr. couldn't beat Billy Joel Saunders in that fight, but if he had been matched up against
Andy Lee or something like that,
and I don't think he would come out victorious, and he could have an actual real world title. His dad's chosen the wrong fights for him, and a large part of boxing is matchmaking. You know, the old cliche that stars make fights, it's accurate, isn't it? It's so true, and I feel as though Eubank Jr., you know, despite what Callum Smith says and despite what Billy Joe Saunders says, is an elite fighter. But what he is an elite boxer brawler, and his kryptonite, his weakness is boxer punches, or just skilled boxers. I say boxer punches because Groves had a bit of power on him as well. He can't handle a boxer, and that's why he struggled with Billy Joel, and he struggled against Groves as well. I know that the guy was a master boxer, but he was really finished by the time he fought Eubank Jr. And I just think Eubank Jr., you know, with his work rate, will give other work rate fighters trouble, will give other brawlers trouble. But you put him in there against a master boxer, and you know, 9 times out of 10 he's going to lose, and that's where they've gone wrong. They've matched him in his 2 biggest fights. I don't blame him so much for the George Groves fight because that was in the Super 6, and he didn't really have too much sway in the way that went. He either took the fight or exited the competition. But I think taking that fight against Billy Joe at such a young age was a stupid decision. It was mismanagement.
But he's still got the Gal, you know, on his record. So to be fair, he should be chasing if he wants to try and, I guess, I don't know where he wants to go with his career because he's always seems to be chasing Billy Joe. So he'll be at 160, he'll move to 168 to keep going after Billy. I think what he needs to do is either like not necessarily go after the guys like the Charlos, even though I think that's the talk at the moment. And he keeps mentioning he'll fight anyone, even Triple G. He needs to try and get a big fight with a big name, even if he's not going to win that fight. Someone like the Yildirim fight, he beat him. He should be in there with Canelo, trying to live off of that win or a loss. That name on your resume is still going to elevate you for another big fight, you know, because you've only lost to Canelo. So, you know, his losses will be amazing. Like you lost to Billy Joe, you lost to Groves, and then you lost to Canelo. You've lost the championship. It's nothing to be embarrassed about. He will still get another big fight, you know. And I think that's why we still look at people like Chisora and we look at people like Dylan White still because they've only lost to champions. Yeah,
you're right. Brilliant. Okay, so we'll wrap up there. Been great talking again, and we've covered some great topics. I'm Richard.
I'm Roy.
And this is the TBK podcast.
And this is the TBK podcast.